So, The Art of Self-Defense. This is a film that it is a blatant dark comedy. It's probably and I love the fact that it's a dark comedy in the fact that it takes dead aim at masculinity and how people kind of like define themselves through what they believe makes someone masculine, and how it can contort someone's view of the world, and how and their own personality as well. Now, just like an initial glance at the trailer, like I'm trying to think, like if you only saw like 30-second bumpers on this, you might think it's something akin to kind of maybe like Napoleon Dynamite. I mean, you have Jesse Eisenberg, who plays Casey, who's kind of like this meek accountant who, he's bullied in the office. He doesn't feel like he can stand up for himself. Like, he feels like he's assaulted. He goes out to walk on the street one night and he's mugged. Like, he feels like he has no control over his life. And so he seeks out learning karate at a local, kind of like karate dojo, which is meant for adults and kids. And you think like, okay, he's going to maybe he'll learn some karate here, or maybe he'll take it too far, and maybe he'll go nuts with it. And to an extent, he does, but it goes in like such a bizarre direction, and a very kind of like I mentioned, I mentioned Napoleon Dynamite, and it's not in that same vein of like quite being quirky. It's more or less a sense of like being offbeat, in the sense that what Casey goes through here is strange, like super strange, super dark, like extremely like kind of like violent and disturbing, and at the same time just absurdly hilarious the way that it's staged here. So when he gets into the karate dojo, he's approached by the kind of like the master of the place, called Sensei, and he only wants to be called Sensei, which is very blatant for a specific reason. Who's played by Alessandro Nivola, and he takes his job very, very seriously. He realizes that Casey is not just attending karate classes so that he can learn how to punch and kick and gain a little bit of self-confidence. He knows that Casey wants to do this because he wants to feel masculine. And he basically instructs him not only how to be violent enough to be masculine, but also every aspect of his life. Like, instead of listening to adult contemporary, he says you should listen to heavy metal. If you like France, no, you got to change that to German. You have a dachshund, well, you got to change that to a German Shepherd. You got to change all these aspects of your life to feel confident. Now, of course, it's silly. Yes, you see the way that they behave in this dojo, and they take everything way too seriously. Not only do they go over the top in thinking that karate is a huge part of like every aspect of their life, but they essentially lie. I mean, it seems kind of fairly evident, because like they introduce Sensei introduces the dojo was once founded by their master, which is this kind of like this black guy with sunglasses, this black guy with glasses wielding a sword in this one photo. And they say like he was so powerful that he made his own belt of his own colors and mastered his own moves, including one move where he could apparently make men's heads explode with the mere use of his index finger. Now, of course, we know that this is all just fabricated. We know these are lies. But the way that these lies are kind of like spun and kind of like built up to make you feel like you're more in control of your life, to feel like you have more power. They push it way over the edge of absurdity. So yes, it is tackling toxic masculinity in a very direct and very surreal way. Like, in order to feel more confident in the office, like Casey's office that he works in is just staged over the top. Like his coworkers just they talk about how much they hate their boss. They talk about sex, and so and they talk about how powerful they are. So naturally, because like Casey comes to the office one day and decides to punch his boss, and then basically insult his coworkers and demand they do push-ups. It would be in any other film he would be fired immediately, well, he actually is kind of like fired, but instead everyone's just kind of like dumbfounded, because this is more or less how like they see themselves like asserted as like alpha males. So everyone is like kind of terrified by this aspect of Casey. But there are other aspects that they do address with masculinity as well. Specifically, at the dojo, they have one female student who has apparently been there the longest. She's done her best. But because of like the way that Sensei runs things, like she hasn't received her black belt yet. She doesn't have her own locker room. She's banned from the communal locker rooms and has to change in the boiler room. Now Casey looks at this and thinks like, well, if I'm following all the aspects of karate, naturally you would get a black belt, but why isn't this happening? And then he realizes because something is wrong here. It's a matter of power and how you wield that power, more or less. And it goes down such bizarre routes here. It goes super dark. Like when it gets violent, it gets incredibly violent. I'm talking like limbs snapped, throats ripped out, people stabbed, people shot, people's heads being smashed into the concrete, dogs killing people, people getting shot up, and when it gets absurd, it gets super absurd. Like like kind of like deadpan delivery. This is bizarre dialogue, but in some ways it kind of fits with this bizarre ass narrative that takes dead aim at it. And I love the fact, like, I know for a lot of people they're gonna think this is like way too unsubtle, like it's being very blunt with what it's trying to say in the film here. But I think I kind of like that aspect too, because we live in a world right now where people mistake Starship Troopers for anything other than satire, and I've seen like Twitter posts where people believe that that Taxi Driver is just a B movie, without without delving into these aspects. This film makes itself very clear from the beginning that that it is satire, that it is targeting something directly here. Like Riley Stearns, who had previously directed a film called Faults, is very good about that. He makes his films very well known so that they can't be misread in this type of way. And I kind of like that. I mean, this film goes down some bizarre routes. It's shot incredibly well to seem both like kind of like quirky and off at the same time. There's a brilliant bit in the climax here, which I don't want to spoil too much here, but there's like kind of like a brilliant throwback to if anyone's familiar with like the Faces of Death series of exploitation films. There's a great little like kind of like tie-in with that as it relates to the way that the sensei is running this dojo, and essentially what he's preying on here too. So this film, it is so strange and bizarre, but it's wonderfully acted. Like everyone is taking these roles incredibly seriously. Like they take it all with like straight faces, so that even when the film is being dark and deeply serious, because it's taking it that far, you kind of just break down. Like there were several moments where I just like broke down laughing just from the very tongue-in-cheek nature of how all of this is showcased here. So I love the way that the film like sends up like like the idea of masculinity, and how like we tell ourselves this stuff so that we can feel more powerful. It makes itself very clear, like this is what it's targeting, this is what it's trying to say, and there's the absurdity to it is just so goddamn brilliant that I couldn't get enough of this film. I cannot wait to go see this film again. It is by far one of my favorite comedies, I guess you'd say, this year. I guess it's technically a dark comedy, so yeah, I'll count it as that. This is definitely one of the best comedies I've seen of the year. It has a lot to say. Like I said, it says it with like all the force of a wrecking ball. But in some cases, with this type of stuff, you kind of have to. Otherwise, it might be misread. But there's no danger of that here. So, The Art of Self-Defense. 4.5 out of 5 stars.